The house that day was quieter than usual. My parents were both away, and only Carlos and I remained in the house. I was lying on the sofa, my eyes fixed absent-mindedly on the TV screen flashing a comedy. The atmosphere was so peaceful that I almost didn't care about anything but the images flashing before my eyes. Suddenly, I saw him get up, and his eyes flashed with some strange power, as if he had just noticed something important. Giving absolutely no explanation, he took a run to the main door. Still wondering, the soft click announced that Carlos had locked the door. He finally turned his back to me, his eyes heavy with some hard-to-tell emotion, then did a quick walk for me. Before I could understand what was happening, Carlos rushed over, pouncing on me, not giving time for reaction. It seemed the space was stifling, time seeming to stand still. I froze, numb, and all that happened as with a sudden tornado blowing away all fronts. What was going to come next, I knew would alter my life beyond recognition. Hello, I'm Melissa, a girl who just turned 20, living happily with her small family. As the only child, I always receive lots of love and care from my parents. They always give me the best things and support my personal interests. Among those interests, raising pets, especially lovely dogs, is my greatest passion. My love for dogs started when I was 14 years old. When I was a child, I used to watch animal TV serials very frequently, and the images of loyal, lovely dogs always impressed me. I begged my parents for a long time to get me a dog. Finally, one fine day, my parents agreed and took me to the stable to choose a four-legged friend as a mate. As I entered the kennel, I was overwhelmed by the calm dogs there, but out of all of them, there was one particular dog that immediately caught my eye. He had silky fur, gentle eyes and an impressively long body. Although the Great Dane is known for being a large dog, as a puppy he was very cute and innocent. From the first look, I felt a special connection to this dog. I didn't hesitate to choose him as my new friend. At first, my parents were quite surprised by my choice. They were concerned that a dog the size of a Great Dane might be difficult to handle, but with my worth and love for this dog, I believed it. We brought him home and named him Carlos. My first few days with Carlos were truly a memorable experience. He was naughty and loved. Carlos was very intelligent and learned basic commands like sit, stop and wait quickly. We became best friends as we spent every moment with each other, from walking in the park to enjoying peacetime. Over time, Carlos grew up very quickly. He turned out to be a great dog, tall but still gentle and loyal. Carlos was not only a pet, but also an important member of the family. Whenever I felt sad or stressed, Carlos was always there to comfort me with his gentle eyes and pure loving eyes. To me, Carlos was more than just a dog. He was a friend, a companion, and also a testament to his unconditional love for people and animals. I begged my parents for a long time to get me a dog. Finally, one fine day, my parents agreed and took me to the stable to choose a four-legged friend as a mate. As I entered the kennel, I was overwhelmed by the calm dogs there, but out of all of them, there was one particular dog that immediately caught my eye. He had silky fur, gentle eyes and an impressively long body. Although the Great Dane is known for being a large dog, as a puppy he was very cute and innocent. From the first look, I felt a special connection to this dog. I didn't hesitate to choose him as my new friend. At first, my parents were quite surprised by my choice. They were concerned that a dog the size of a Great Dane might be difficult to handle, but with my worth and love for this dog, I believed it. We brought him home and named him Carlos. My first few days with Carlos were truly a memorable experience. He was naughty and loved. Carlos was very intelligent and learned basic commands like sit, stop and wait quickly. We became best friends as we spent every moment with each other, from walking in the park to enjoying peacetime. Over time, Carlos grew up very quickly. He turned out to be a great dog, tall but still gentle and loyal. Carlos was not only a pet, but also an important member of the family. Whenever I felt sad or stressed, Carlos was always there to comfort me with his gentle eyes and pure loving eyes. To me, Carlos was more than just a dog. He was a friend, a companion, and also a testament to his unconditional love for people and animals. Whenever I feel sad or stressed, Carlos will always comfort me with his gentle eyes and adorable licks. To me, Carlos is not just a dog. He is a friend, a companion, and a testament to his unconditional love for humans and animals. Thanks to Carlos, I have learned to be patient, responsible, and to appreciate life's simpler moments. I believe everyone needs a special friend like Carlos for everyone in their life who will always love you unconditionally and never abandon you no matter who you are or where you are. I always thought Carlos and I would love each other forever and live a quiet life like that, but unexpectedly when I was 20 years old, an event occurred that dramatically changed the relationship between Carlos and me. It's a beautiful Sunday morning. As usual, Carlos and I went for a walk in the park near our house. Carlos likes walking like this. He ran to breathe in the fresh air, and sometimes I stop to smell the flowering bushes or watch the birds fly. I am always happy to see Carlos so happy, but that morning was different. As we walked, Carlos suddenly pulled away. He stopped, ears swollen, eyes following other dogs in the distance. She is also a Great Dane, but it was a woman with a shimmering golden robe and walked gracefully. As soon as he saw the dog, Carlos suddenly felt drawn to him by an invisible force of gravity. He wagged his tail vigorously. His big legs shot so fast that I couldn't react. I held the leash tightly around Carlos's neck. Do your best to hold him back. But Carlos was too strong. He dragged me away. It stunned me and nearly fell over. I called out for Carlos, but he didn't hear it. He was running on the other side with the other dog. As if love at first sight struck him. My heart was in a mess, and I didn't know what to do. Finally, out of desperation, I yelled, "Carlos, stop!" It was loud enough to startle Carlos. He halted and turned to look at me with a confused and guilty expression. Only then did I notice the feeling of sadness on Carlos's face. His eyes were cast down, ears drooped as if he understood he made me sad. There was nothing I could do but gently tug on the leash and take Carlos home. On the way back, I could see that Carlos was not at his usual self. He was no longer running and wagging happily but walking slowly and quietly beside me. Emotionally unexplainable was surging up in my heart. I both felt sorry for Carlos, felt guilty for shouting at him, but mostly I was wondering if it would still be the same between us after this. That very night, Carlos lay in the corner of the house. He seemed to drift into a daze, probably due to thoughts about the Great Dane he had accosted or met that very morning. I can be seen walking closer and stroking Carlos's soft fur while whispering, "Carlos, come what may, I'll always love you. However, I would also like you to listen to me. Do you understand this?" Carlos raised his head to look at me, eyes sparkling as if he wanted to assure, "I do get it." I smiled faintly, hoping that nothing could change our friendship. That night, as always, I embraced Carlos as I slept. He was used to tucking himself on the side, his steady breaths always calming and comforting, and then I lay my hand on his back, stroking the smooth fur as I always did before sleep. But just when my hand brushed across an area, Carlos emitted a little moan as though he felt disturbed. The sound was faint enough to give me a start, but apparently, Carlos's sleep was so deep that it did not seem to disturb him one bit. I withdrew my hand, my heart beginning to beat in an odd way. At this moment, I was feeling odd, both confused and startled. I lay there, looking up, not moving in the dark by the glow of the night light. A lot of random thoughts came in my mind and made me restless. It was not the first time I felt some special rapport with Carlos, but this was certainly something very strange. Unable to hold back my curiosity, I gently sat up, alighted from the bed, and looked. Where? In front of me, lay the stick placed upon the bed. Just one quick sight of it gave me this utterly indescribable feeling in my heart, nervous yet exhilarated. Slowly, I sat up, gazing down at the stick. My heart knew not what to feel. Then, As something within me seemed to take possession of my will, I gently put my hand into the ooze, and it was warm and indescribable. Every time I touched it, Carlos quivered just a little. A little while later, it oozed and stuck to my hand as I looked at Carlos, now peacefully sleeping, not wanting him to wake up. I laid myself back down beside him and held him. I did not sleep for quite a long time that night. It kept feeling so weird and puzzling, opening like a new door between me and Carlos, and I couldn't imagine how the most natural reactions from him could get me to a different and deeper connection than ever with him. He wasn't just a loyal dog but a complex animal with emotions and reactions that needed time to learn. That night, something strange began to seep into me, indescribable. Every time I looked at Carlos, my heart would suddenly race faster, the simmering vibrations now rising strongly. I no longer saw Carlos in quite the same light, not just a dog, a companion, but rather something more particular, deeper. It was a feeling that left me both confused and excited, wondering what was really going on inside me. Even Carlos seemed to notice the difference in me. Every time our eyes met, there was an unspoken understanding, a bond that felt stronger and more profound than ever before. I looked at him and his eyes were no longer the same. They seemed slower, more thoughtful, like he was trying to read my mind. There were times when I caught Carlos staring at me for far too long, his glittering eyes filled with emotions I couldn't name. The connection between us, already very deep, now seemed to have been pushed to a new level of meaning. Carlos and I sat in the yard one afternoon, sunlight shining lightly on the trees. Carlos lay beside me, his head resting on my lap, his eyes half closed as if savoring the peacefulness of the moment. I reached out to stroke Carlos's smooth fur, feeling the warmth emanating from it. But this time, instead of the usual sensation, I felt an electric current run through my body. That brief relationship suddenly shook me in a strange way. I bent down and looked at Carlos for a long time. He opened his eyes, his big brown eyes sparkling with strange understanding. In that moment I felt something telling me, something we both understood but couldn't put into words. Carlos's gaze confused me, but at the same time it felt strangely warm. Things were out of control until one day. That day, my parents had to go out all day. It was just me and Carlos left at home, a home that is always full of laughter and warmth. It was strangely quiet. Carlos and I each have our own space. That feeling made me excited and a little strange. It was as if something special was going to happen. Carlos lay next to me, his eyes following my every move. It was as if he sensed something strange in the atmosphere. I don't know what made me so restless that day, but Carlos's eyes, always gentle and understanding, seemed to be waiting for something. The house was quiet, with only the sound of bells ringing in the air. Carlos and I sat in the living room together. The TV screen flickered with the lights of a romantic movie. I made the choice to chill and sit back on the sofa while Carlos laid egregiously close to my feet, his head resting lightly against my knee. The light reflected from the TV made Carlos's eyes shine even brighter. Suddenly, I found Carlos standing, his eyes glowing with strange intensity, as if he just came to realize something important. With no word of explanation, he hurriedly moved toward the main door. I was still wondering when there happened to be a light click. Carlos had locked the door. Turning around, his eyes were blazing with unknown emotion. He quickly walked toward me. I had not even comprehended what was happening before Carlos rushed forward, leaping onto me before I could gather thought. The space seemed to suffocate and time seemed to freeze. I froze in stunned silence before the end came like a torrent out of a clear sky that washed away everything that was. That sudden realization made me freeze. Suspense in the air stifled space. Time shrank into the void. Everything around me slipped hazily from view, leaving only that arrhythmic pounding against my chest. What came after was like a windstorm that swept away all boundaries and distinctions. I had made a decision to relax, sit down on the sofa, while Carlos lay close to my feet, head resting lightly against my knee. The light reflected by the TV only made Carlos's eyes shine even brighter. Suddenly I found Carlos standing looking at me with strange intensity in his eyes, as if he had just come to realize something important. Without any kind of explanation, he hurriedly moved to the front door. I was still wondering when there was a soft click. Carlos had locked the door. Turning around, his eyes were blazing with unknown emotion. Quickly, he walked towards me. I hadn't even comprehended what was going on before Carlos rushed forward, leaping onto me before I could gather thought. Space seemed to be suffocated. Time seemed to stop. I was frozen for a moment in stunned silence, and then all happened like a bolt from the blue that knocked off all boundaries of previous existence. That sudden realization made me freeze. Time seemed to stop and space suffocated. Everything around me faded hazily out of view, and I was left with that thump against my chest. What followed was like a windstorm that swept everything away. Boundaries and distances no exception. I could not fathom what had gotten into Carlos or what to do in this moment. But one thing was for sure: this would change my life forever. The door had been opened, and there was no way of closing it again. From that moment on, there was some kind of invisible connection between Carlos and me. A feeling I could not quite describe but which was haunting. We never had any more words about it, but each glance exchanged between us reinforced our fears. It was almost a sublime peace, a secret only he and I knew, as if an ember was smoldering, and it was compared with the eerie calm of the whole house. The following time came more naturally, as though through some mutual sort of understanding where we both knew how to begin. Each time he entered my closed-door room, Carlos would come up to me like a lion but tenderly, the way he would touch me as if to declare that I really belonged to him and him alone. Of course, I cannot say I fully disapproved, because a part of me just wanted that feeling, a feeling hazardous and, at the same time, exhilarating. Being with Carlos brought on the feeling that I forgot all about everything else around me, emotions flowing in, rattling me from inside, ready to explode any moment. It wasn't just the physical contact. It was a case of my body's cells reacting to Carlos's presence. My heart was beating faster, my breathing got heavier, and I couldn't control my body's reactions. All worries, all thoughts of consequences disappeared, leaving only the strong attraction that Carlos brought. It is in such moments that, when the room grew quiet once more, I would sit and question myself. In my heart, I knew it was wrong. It was something that my parents would never accept, the very people who always believed in us. That feeling, that indescribable feeling, was something I could never let go of. It was like an addiction. It scared me, yet it made me hungry for more. I kept all this confined to my heart, acting normal in front of my parents. Deep down, I knew this relationship would not be recognized by everybody, but I couldn't escape, nor could Carlos. As the days went by, I maintained that calm under familiar walls, but somewhere inside, a voice echoed that couldn't continue for long. I couldn't imagine the retaliation to sour the candy. Had I gathered courage to do so, we continued sliding down an endless way, like in a whirlpool from which I couldn't escape. Then came the day I received an admission to a far-off university, and once again it was rather bizarre to describe the sensation inside. I should have rejoiced because a new turn had just emerged, but inexplicably, I was filled with sorrow. Once again, I could sense that I had to leave Carlos, my confidant, my partner, and more importantly, the only one with whom I had that unexplainable something. There would come a time when I had to leave for good, and I tried not to think about that. The distance would spare me this agony. The fresh start would put my heart at ease. Each time I looked into Carlos's eyes, however, I felt like I was betraying him and everything we shared. The day I left, a deafening silence filled the house. My parents helped me pack my belongings into a suitcase, and Carlos followed me silently, his wistful eyes following my every move. He seemed to understand that I was leaving and things would never be the same again. As the car pulled away, I leaned over and kissed Carlos one last time. Her fur was as warm as ever, but today that kiss held a depth of sadness that I couldn't describe. Carlos rubbed his head gently on my shoulder as if to stop me. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I tried to hold them back in front of my parents. The car started moving, and I turned my head to look behind me. Carlos stood in the doorway, his eyes bright in the morning sunlight, but filled with emptiness. He didn't run after me, he just stood there silently and watched me leave. Leave part 2 in the comment to hear the